Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking into some really fascinating material, specifically diving into insights from genome Dr. Zhou Yuing Cole and this idea he calls the genome compass.
Right. It's this perspective on understanding, well,
Mhm.
almost everything happening around us.
Right.
Society, technology like AI, genome analysis, but through the lens of our genes.
Exactly, and how those genes interact with, our environment, our experiences, trying to find scientific, maybe even philosophical answers right there in our biology.
It's a really interesting framework.
And the specific angle we're digging into today is frankly kind of mind-blowing. It's the link between our mind and our actual biological age.
Yeah, we often think they're totally separate things, don't we?
Totally. Like aging just happens
Yeah.
and your mood is just, well, your mood. But this source material really challenges that whole idea. It suggests a deep, deep biological connection. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack that. How does our mental state, specifically something like depression, not just feel bad, but potentially speed up how our body ages? Like right down at the genetic level.
And what that actually means for our health, our lifespan,
Yeah.
maybe even our health span, those good years.
Right. Critically important stuff. Okay, let's get into it. So let's start with that common saying, depression is like a cold for the mind.
Ah, yeah. Heard that one. Makes it sound manageable, maybe?
Exactly. Relatable, happens to anyone, maybe not a huge deal. But the source material says, hold on, that's only half right. Yes, it can affect anyone, like a cold.
But that's where the comparison stops. It's definitely not light. Far from it.
Far from it. And the source brings biology into the picture here, doesn't it?
It really does. It points to some pretty serious evidence. Studies from places like UCSF, Harvard,
Mm-hmm.
looking at people with long-term or recurrent depression.
Okay, and what did they find?
Well, this is the striking part. They found these individuals had significantly shorter telomeres compared to people without that history of depression.
Telomeres. Remind us quickly, those are the caps and the ends of chromosomes, right?
Exactly. Like the plastic tips on shoelaces,
Yep.
protecting the DNA. They naturally shorten as cells divide, so they're a known marker of, well, cellular aging.
Got it. So shorter telomeres mean older cells, biologically speaking.
Precisely. And these studies, they found the cells of people with long-term depression looked biologically 7 to 10 years older on average, just based on telomere length.
Wow, 7 to 10 years just from depression.
Yeah.
That's huge. It really shifts the perspective from it's just a mood thing to something physically wearing down your body.
It really does. And it's not just one type of finding either. The source brings up another key piece of evidence, a 2023 study in Nature Communications. This one used something called the epigenetic clock.
Okay, epigenetic clock sounds advanced. What is that measuring? How does it work?
It's another way to gauge biological age, but instead of telomeres, it looks at chemical tags on the DNA itself. Methylation patterns.
Methylation, right. These tags change how genes are expressed.
Exactly. They don't alter the DNA code, but they act like dimmer switches, turning genes up or down, on or off, based on things like lifestyle, environment, and stress. The epigenetic clock measures these patterns across lots of genes to estimate your biological age.
Okay.
In this 2023 study, it found a clear link. People whose epigenetic clock showed them as biologically older than their actual age were also significantly more likely to have depression and anxiety.
So shorter telomeres and a faster epigenetic clock linked to depression.
Put them together, yeah. The author's argument gets really strong.
Yeah.
Depression isn't just happening in the brain. It looks like a catalyst, something that actually speeds up biological aging system-wide.
You can actually see it, measure it at the cellular level.
That's the takeaway. Measurable physical wear and tear.
That is profound and a bit unsettling, honestly. So the big question is how? How can a feeling, this mental state, physically change our biology like that?
Right. How does the emotion translate into DNA changes?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
And this is where that genome compass idea, the gene-environment interaction, really comes into focus. It's all about epigenetics.
Okay.
So the source explains epigenetics as this layer of control over the DNA sequence. Our experiences, environment, stress, emotions, they can all influence these epigenetic tags, these methylation patterns we just talked about.
Like software telling the hardware what to do.
That's a great analogy, yeah. It's changing which genes get used, how much, without rewriting the basic code.
Okay, so how does depression specifically fit in?
Well, the source highlights specific genes involved in our stress response system. You might have heard of some, like FKBP5, NR3C1. They're key players.
Vaguely familiar, yeah. Stress genes.
Right. And the chronic emotional stress that often comes with depression. It can physically alter the methylation patterns on those specific genes.
So the stress literally flips switches or turns dials on the DNA near those stress genes.
You got it. Chemical tags get added or removed, changing how those genes work.
And what happens then? What are the downstream effects?
The source lays it out. These epigenetic changes triggered by that chronic stress can lead to a less effective immune system, for one, slower response.
Okay, that makes sense.
Also, decreased metabolic function. Things just don't run as efficiently in the body. And even impacts on the brain itself reduce resilience of nerve cells, slower repair.
Wow.
So this is the mechanism the author proposes, that constant emotional strain isn't just in your head. Through these epigenetic tweaks, it's essentially manipulating the gene switches. And the source uses this really striking phrase. It says a depressed mindset can, at the gene level, actually turn on the aging genes.
Turn on the aging genes. That's not a metaphor, then.
Doesn't seem like it, according to this research.
It's not just feeling old or tired. It's literally activating biological pathways that push your cells, your whole system, towards an older state. That just changes how you have to think about mental health.
Fundamentally. And this connection, this deep biological link, it goes way beyond just how fast cells age. It has huge implications for our overall physical health.
Right, because the source argues depression isn't just a mood disorder.
Exactly. It draws on these big population studies showing that things like depression are independent risk factors for major chronic diseases.
Independent meaning. It's not just that sick people get depressed, but depression itself increases the risk.
That's the key point. It seems to significantly raise your chances of developing cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, even some cancers, and dementia, separate from other factors.
Okay, what are the pathways connecting that feeling of depression to, say, heart disease?
The source points to several things working together. There's the chronic stress and inflammation that depression often fuels. That low-grade constant inflammation is really bad long-term.
Right, we hear a lot about inflammation.
Then there's sleep. Sleep disruption is huge in depression, and that messes up almost every system in the body. Metabolic imbalances are common too.
And maybe lifestyle changes that come with it.
Definitely. Often an increase in things like smoking, drinking, being inactive, and maybe less motivation for healthy habits. Plus, social isolation that often goes hand in hand with depression and is itself a risk factor for poor health. Lower self-esteem can also mean less self-care.
So it's this whole cascade of effects, all stemming from or amplified by the depression.
Yeah, all contributing to this physical decline, underpinned by those epigenetic changes we talked about.
Which really highlights that difference between lifespan, how long we live, and health span.
Exactly. How many good functional years do we get?
Yeah.
The source mentions a big meta-analysis from the Lancet Psychiatry in 2017. It looked at lots of studies and found that a history of mental illness was linked to, on average, over 7 years shorter health span.
7 years lost from healthy living. That's staggering.
It really puts it in perspective, doesn't it? Neglecting mental health isn't just about feeling bad emotionally. It can literally shave years off your vibrant, active life.
Which completely reframes why treating depression is so important. It's not just about feeling better.
Right. The source argues treatment is a fundamental intervention with real biological impact on aging and physical health.
How so? Like with common medications.
Yeah, take SSRIs, the common antidepressants. The source explains they're not just tweaking mood chemicals. They seem to promote neurogenesis, actual growth of new nerve cells, especially in the hippocampus.
The memory and emotion center.
Right, which often takes a hit from chronic stress. And SSRIs also increase BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
BDNF, that sounds important.
Think of it like Miracle-Gro for your brain cells. It helps them grow, survive, connect. So these treatments aren't just masking symptoms. They're helping the brain recover and protecting it from aging effects.
That's really interesting. It's treating the brain, but with these wider potential benefits. What about Valproate? The source mentioned that too, sometimes used alongside antidepressants.
Yeah, Valproate. It's originally for epilepsy or bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
They're sometimes used as an add-on for depression. Its mechanism's interesting here. It's an HDAC inhibitor.
HDAC inhibitor. Okay, what does that mean in simple terms?
So HDAC inhibitors affect gene expression through those epigenetic mechanisms again. They can sort of reopen access to genes that might have been shut down. The source mentions Valproate is reported to help nerve cells differentiate and survive.
And that links to anti-aging.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Because HDAC inhibitors are involved in processes central to regeneration and longevity, things like stem cell reprogramming, calming inflammation, tissue repair. So the author suggests medications like this hint at a future where treating the mind is part of an anti-aging strategy, working on these fundamental biological pathways. But beyond specific drugs, the bigger point is that effectively treating depression helps normalize so many things. Crucial for healthy aging, sleep gets better, people often become more active, metabolism can regulate, social connections rebuild, emotional resilience strengthens.
These aren't just side benefits, they're core components of physical health.
Exactly. Pillars supporting longevity and that all-important health span.
It's such a powerful convergence, thinking about mental health through this biological, genetic lens. And the source also looks ahead, right, at how technology is starting to play a role.
Absolutely. This brings us to the idea of mental health becoming a kind of digital biomarker. It ties back to that genome compass view of integrating tech and biology.
Digital biomarker, meaning our devices can track our mental state?
In a way, yes. Think about wearable devices tracking sleep quality, heart rate variability, activity levels, even smartphone usage patterns, voice analysis, typing speed. All this can potentially provide quantitative, objective data about our emotional states and behaviors.
Data we never really had before, not objectively.
Right. And this data is feeding into something the author calls precision psychiatry.
Precision psychiatry, tailoring treatment very specifically.
Exactly. Moving beyond broad categories and using this rich digital data combined with, say, your individual genetic profile for stress response and your specific life circumstances to create truly personalized mental health care.
Not just take this pill, but a plan based on your unique biology and real-time feedback.
That's the goal. The source even breaks down the components. You'd have genome analysis looking at those stress genes like FKBP5, or maybe longevity genes like SRT1. You'd use the epigenetic clock to quantify the biological aging impact. You'd have the wearable digital monitoring for continuous data and well-timed interventions.
You know all that leads to?
Personalized treatment. Using all that info, your genes, your clock, your tracker data to pick the right medication, or suggest very specific lifestyle adjustments that work best for you.
It's fascinating. Our mental state, something that felt so internal and subjective, becoming this key measurable indicator, a digital biomarker of our biological age and health.
Yeah, it connects the inner feeling with the outer measurable biology in a really direct way.
This deep dive has really connected a lot of dots. So pulling it all together, drawing from this genome compass perspective, what's the big message for us, for the listener?
I think the source makes an incredibly strong case. Taking care of your mind isn't separate from taking care of your body. They are fundamentally biologically intertwined.
It's not one or the other.
Not at all. The author frames mental well-being as a core genome-based strategy for slowing down biological aging, preventing chronic disease, and actually designing a longer, healthier life.
Designing it actively.
Yes. The central message is that treating depression or just proactively managing your mental health isn't only about feeling better emotionally. It's presented as a fundamental way to potentially, as the source says, turn off aging gene switches.
Wow.
To extend your health span, maintain your quality of life. The source even suggests that in this era of precision medicine and anti-aging focus, tackling mental health, especially depression, might be the most critical first step you can take.
That really elevates mental health care, doesn't it? From just managing symptoms to being foundational for longevity.
Absolutely.
So a depressed mind, as the evidence suggests here, isn't just a mood problem. It's a powerful biological factor that seems to be pushing the accelerator on aging at the cellular level, which leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. What does knowing this change about how you think about your own mental and physical well-being?
Does it change how you view stress or periods of low mood? The importance of reaching out.
Yeah. This deep dive, guided by these insights from Genome Dr. Ju Yusei, really pushes us to consider that profound, tangible link between how we feel today and our biological future tomorrow. Something to really mull over.